Hello. Hello. This is John Nathan Jones, and we are here to discuss options and opportunities in which we've noticed someone's therapy showing. And before we get into specific details about who and how we're observing these therapeutic and inspirational movements, moments, conversations, we want to bring out an expectation management list of ideal versions of what we're looking for through the media and the content and the curated visuals and audios that we are engaged with. Specifically, we listen to a lot of music, podcasts, what specific media is intending to project or explain. So I'm not talking about, House on Haunted Hill for your therapy's showing, but but we might look at something very similar to we just watched. This is the Paris Hilton documentary, and we noticed mindful emotional awareness throughout as action as opposed to being explained or told or saying, oh, this is what I've learned in therapy. There are opportunities and options to be able to interject things you've learned in therapy or therapeutic conversations, as opposed to how does that make you feel, and learning about what is driving this emotionally. Understanding the nuance of needing to identify that as opposed to being told that or being guided toward that. They're very different regulations of how you reach the goal of understanding or processing or therapeutic work. So in the expectations of how we're going to address that specifically, we've we've laid out well, when your therapy's showing, we want expectation management. We want conversation management. So expectation management is somebody says, well, didn't you used to be, and what I've noticed with people who have engaged in therapy, who have been taught things, one of the things that was most impactful in my life was saying something to somebody that was out of character for the conversation that was needed in the moment, and instead of reprimanding me or becoming angry or facilitating a negative environment, the individual looked at me and said, well, I used to think I was in control of things that I wasn't in control of. And I looked in the moment and I thought, and I have moved forward in my life with that information specifically. Like, I've since engaged in conversation where that topic was glossed over or introduced. Like, I didn't know what I was, like, it's different from I didn't know what I was doing. And so that in and of itself is a moment of expanded knowledge, expanded understanding and consciousness of what therapy has taught someone. I've been able to take that same it was an engagement, an encounter, a conversation, but it was a subset of a larger conversation that was going on in the moment. It was something that I caught. It was subtle. It was nuanced. It was powerful. It was a conversation management. This is the end of that sentence in that conversation, because now you understand that, and I did understand in the moment directly. That was the most direct thing I could have heard. Very similar to when for narrative management, it was reclaiming a narrative for someone else that says, other people thought these things about me, and what I realized is I did not have control of what I thought I was doing. And to understand that about yourself then takes the liability away from the younger you that thought that they were doing that. And it's a very nuanced thing to be able to do. It's a directional shift that we look for in the world now, because that has been brought to spotlight. So, like, if you're not therapeutic, if you're not welcoming, if you're not inviting, if you're not the perfect politically correct, open and inviting individual for all purpose and all people at all times, then you're at risk for being told that you're too emotional, you're not emotional enough. You're at risk for people weaponizing emotion against you. So the way that we this conversation in and of itself, therapy in and of itself, is a form of self-defense. It teaches you about why you do the things you do, not how to fix the things you do. That's work. But therapy in the shadow work of that is the explanation. It's like sitting your little kid self down and being like, listen, buddy, or lady, or however you talk to yourself. And it's a form of self-protection that used to be aggression or jokes or laughing it off, and that internal fortitude has shifted because the lens has shifted. Like, people are saying you need to be vulnerable, you need to be emotional, you need to be able to understand these things, you need to know why people feel the way they feel. And that's not necessarily true. It will enhance the way your relationships go. But that's not like, not everybody can afford that. Not everybody's being given that. You're being told that you need what's a $20,000 to $30,000 a year service to behave and to be welcome into society. And while that, that used to be taught at home, that used to be taught at church, and now we're looking for the alternatives to how we can gain that training and conditioning of the human soul, of the human interaction, and through the autonomy of self-regulation. Like, for somebody, one of the ones that so what we're looking for specifically is mindful emotional awareness. That's what that expectation and conversation and narrative management that I've personally experienced, that I've been able to witness. And it's mostly in like young pop stars and young actresses and younger male actors who are new to press and media, who get bombarded with ignorant questions, or from my era where the ignorance was the money. So like, are you still a virgin? Is a sentence you would never hear today. And you can imagine if somebody were to walk up to Britney Spears on a 2020 interview and be like, "Are you still a virgin?" That someone would need to step in somewhere. And I personally experienced like the berating of being told that is the way that the world is, and it was. And now that it's not, they're taking the newspaper that they put "you're a slut" on, and then rolling it up and bashing it in everyone's face because the media is guilty of allowing that narrative to be what it is. And while that is what it is, that's its job. Like, that sells papers and you buy them. So in order to be able to bring that regulation to our own behavior, like it's nice to think that everybody's working on this, but they're not. But you can be individually. And we're not discussing what therapy needs to happen. I'm identifying through the content that I'm watching, because I watch podcasts and mostly music in my older years, but I'm identifying immediately, oh, that's emotionally driven behavior. Oh, that's some cognitive flexibility that they just demonstrated by choosing something different in the moment, and that I'm looking for that as opposed to waiting for the result. And that's a different shift of perspective. It's an older, more mature shift of perspective that is not always present for everyone, but specifically for me. Like, my alternative actions take place, and my emotionally driven behaviors are almost always to be in avoidance. So in order to be able to recognize something from someone else's effort, to say like, and to pinpoint that out, and we're seeing a lot of that lately, because I think post pandemic and post quarantine, people really dived into their selves and had to take looks at themselves and their behaviors. I think there's a reflection that is happening from the internet, from past, that people of fame and notoriety are now forced to reckon with. Sarah Silverman is a good example of that, for having studied, like in this last week, the works of Paris Hilton, and her very brave and the level of ownership that she has over her recovery, but also her trauma, and what she will do about that. Not what needs to happen, like, she has chosen to demonstrate and show, this is what I'm doing with that trauma. And not everybody has that level of strength or access or ingenuity to be able to put it towards that, because a lot of us hide it, we tuck it away, we create small nuanced art with it, we put it into our sentences, into our lives, into our relationships, and that is the way that's designed to go. It's a disbursement. And so, as we recognize the people coming back around with apology notes and apology videos and the things, it's the apology is not so much necessary. Have you ever noticed, like, when people get in trouble, especially when we were kids, and the parents would always be like, "I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed," or you try to make amends within the first 5 minutes, and like, you didn't have enough time to be able to think about what you even did. You're not sorry that you did it. You're sorry that you got caught. And to know that level of nuance is the expectation has always been there, but now it's being broadcast. Like if you put yourself out there on the internet, or if you put yourself out there into the world, then your life and liberty are going to be judged and directed. And in order to be able to be mindfully, emotionally aware of that, we recognize that in others. It is kind of like, oh, Paris Hilton has the new thigh high boots. I need some new thigh high boots to splash in all this mud and muck. And so the things that we've decided to bring to the conversation for our segment pieces of Your Therapy is Showing, or to manage the mischief that we've all gotten ourselves into, to understand that there will be a resolution, that there is a resolution, because the rest of the world is trying to put you in a box and say you're done for the day, and you're that's enough internet for you. And that's not only is that not fair, like life might not be fair, but you don't have the obligation and the opportunity to do that to anybody else. Especially, it's the old saying of like glass houses and stones. So figure out which one you are going to be, and then understand that other people are also getting this same information, but this ain't new. Like, this has been going on for a long time. And what we're recognizing, as opposed to, oh, you need therapy, is, oh, people were weaponizing the fact that you didn't know about emotional intelligence for a really fucking long time. And we've now adapted to that, the adaptability of that, like to understand that we're living in a surveillance state. It might not be a government surveillance state. They went ahead and put that on the public, so now it's your fault. So now they have to regulate it, so now they get to be a part of it. And y'all just let that unfold for you. So in order to be able to bring leadership to ourselves and to witness leadership in others, I've segmented three main concepts and an alternate. That's just my alternate. So we have meal, mindful emotional awareness lessons. When we recognize throughout the videos or the commentary that we're watching, if I recognize somebody's mindful emotional awareness, I'm gonna take a screenshot, I'm gonna take a pause button, I'm gonna do something. We'll discuss that through the episode of the week that we're bringing toward mindful emotional awareness observance. Like yes, we need to be observant in ourselves, but when I see that in somebody else, I'm taking note, because it adds up. Like, that's building your library of opportunity to see when other people do that. Then we have cognitive flexibility capture. Like, if you like very specific to me in that moment where I said something that could have had a different reaction, and somebody said, you know what, this is what that is. Cognitive flexibility in that moment. Why, thank you, my dear. Thank you for the grace. But also, I captured that moment in my mind, and it stayed with me forever. That strength and power is being able to shift the perspective and explain who you are and where you are and what you mean in a moment, so that somebody else cannot be confused for what they're interpreting in that moment. It's a very strong stance to have. It's a necessary stance to be able to get to, but it's not the one, like not everybody's going to respond in that way. And so then we look at the responses, which are emotionally driven behaviors, but we've titled that as emotionally driven management, emotionally driven action management. So that's the EDM. So mindful emotional awareness lessons. When we identify a moment, cognitive flexibility is the moment happening and what they do. And emotionally driven action management is guiding the conversation or the narrative to the place that it needs to be, correctly and emotionally and intelligently. And then for the fourth segment, we got the AA, which is alternative actions. That's going to be your B-sides and rarities. Like, what are you bringing to the conversation, and what else could there be? And which version of me are you receiving, and which version of me were you expecting? And so in that understanding of fortitude, we'll be able to segment the conversation of what I see. So instead of just being like, look at this 4 hours worth of interview and documentary series that I've done research on, because every waking minute of that type of vulnerability and demonstration is a mindfully emotional aware. And you know, even in Paris Hilton's documentary, she was not aware that she was going to bring it to a place of emotional resolution by addressing the things that were very passionate and important to her in her trauma. And they explained that directly in the doc, where she's like, you know, this wasn't where this was going. And then the producers came through and said, and I've been in situations, or I've witnessed situations in which producers try to manipulate that into views. And they just very specifically, in this one instance, utilized it as a tool to engage with the conversation that had not yet been had. And so to notice that, to bring that emotional awareness, and then offer the space and the cognitive flexibility to be able to bring a resolution. You know, I'm sure she's still going through things. I'm sure that trauma is very present, but it's found a path. And to be able to guide and direct the energies of that focus, help with the physical being of how your body distributes the pain, how it distributes the emotion, how it distributes the signals. And I personally have been through very similar situations as she has, and I've endured the same the same standardized and weaponized troubled teen industry for longer than my teen years. And so I have a lot of experience and interaction with that level of cognitive flexibility being captured by someone, and then being told, oh, you're a liar, you're a whore, you're a slut, your family's not going to believe you, nobody loves you, and then locked in isolation, and then not fed or watered or taken care of for several weeks or months at a time. It does something to your body, and your body then creates an emotionally driven response and reaction that comes out in bad behavior or negative connotation or poor word choice. And so as we bring the like that, regardless of if that's going to happen, the lesson today and now is that you got something to do about that. And you might not know it, but here's the workbook, and here's the shit that you need to do, and here's an empty journal that you need to fill out. And people not doing that, like you're just going to continue to have the same problems. But the rest of us who have been engaged in this problem, who are watching all of our heroes and our friends and our stars and the people on the front page growing up and getting the places that we needed to figure out how to get. Like, we all needed to figure out how to get in the Von Dutch hat and the sparkly sidekick, and now we all need to figure out how to get our mindful emotional awareness to be understood, and how we can engage in cognitive flexibility as we see others capturing moments of availability for that. It's almost like playing poker and cards. It's like when you see the end and you go and instead of taking the jab, you take the emotional hit and you say, you know what, this is an emotional moment, and let's allow for that to process before we continue. Not everybody's going to do that, but the people who have been through that level of pain, because people who have been through that level of pain or trauma do not have to be nice to you. They do not have to be doing this work. And in fact, the behavior that were probably exuding was the natural behavior for this type of offense. So in order to be able to understand that it is a gift to want to be emotionally driven in your own management, to understand that you want to manage your own emotionally driven behaviors, to understand that there's an option of cognitive flexibility available at all, because you could get what you get. And to know that other people are working on their mindful emotional awareness and bringing that lesson forward so that we have example of what that in and of itself is like, that's brand responsibility. That's corporate social responsibility to bring these lessons forward. Yeah, you can be a bad bitch, but you also need to know why and how you're doing that so that it does not affect a negative impact on another person, because then you become a liability. And knowing that about our human self, like it's always kind of been that way. You just have to watch out who has enough money to be able to make that your problem. And because they get you in lawsuits, or they get you in litigation, or they get you in society. They spread gossip about you at the social circle. So to know that we're looking for that those are the things that we're looking for within the content that we are curating. This first week has been pretty emotional, because I went directly for some hard-hitting information and a little bit too close to home for how I know that, and especially like when it comes to interacting with your parents, or when it comes to interacting with adults who spent a lot of time not believing you, or calling you names, or just thinking you're a bad kid, as opposed to understanding that those behaviors were direct from an antecedent, or either an antecedent or a violation or an obstruction or something within your life that needed an extension that wasn't being directly. And a lot of that, for me, mine was, oh, you're a liar. And, 25 years later, now a bunch of people have had to come through with the apology letters that say, hey, not only were you not a liar, but now I'm in trouble for the shit that I thought you were lying about. And mindful emotional awareness and cognitive flexibility allows for the person who is the victim, instead of pointing at the person that didn't know about the things that were going on to you directly, to say, well, thank you for attending class. And now that you're caught up with the rest of the class, how about we get on board with what mindful emotional awareness looks like, and that we can understand our own cognitive flexibility by witnessing that in others, and by taking the people who have offered their level of strength and their level of commitment to these types of problems, and bring that emotionally driven action management to ourselves that say, other people might march to the beat of their own drum, and so will I in my own way, but I can follow with what works, and I know how to follow what works. And the difference between what works and what's effective and what's necessary then becomes the conversation, as opposed to, we don't know what to do. Because we're stuck in a lot of, we don't know what to fucking do. Like, drugs rule everything around me, and that like the difference between medicine and science and psychology and therapy needs to be understood by the individuals who are being manipulated by that. Like, we don't not know what to do. You're not paying people to tell you what to do. And the people who know what to do are actively profiting off of your inability to be able to be emotionally managed for yourself. That's sales, that's marketing, that's psychology, that's medicine, that's insurance, that's coverage. And to know that there are alternative actions to that, like, it's not going to help you today. There's the problem. I'm 6 years into this shit that happened to me 25, 30 years ago. 6 years into working on it. So that means almost 40 years worth of addressing an issue that did not get healed from the inside out, and having to learn and know how to suture that together for myself became necessary for the conversation. If you listen to Mindful Intention Series or Solution Based Nate, like, that guy, Nate, knows this information inside and out because he was doing it in a different language since he was a 3-year-old baby. But to know that adult John Nathan Jones not only needs to be able to present this, but needs to understand for others why you're not presenting it, and to shift the conversation away from what you're not doing into what you could be doing, and to not make it something that you need to be could be doing, but that you want to could be doing. And that's a very difficult conversation to shift the perspective into other people's lives. But it does have a predictable outcome. It has internal fortitude. Being in your own work of autoregulation, self-regulation, like autoregulatory behavior, even behavior management. If you don't like the way you're being, then you can do something different. But a lot of us understand, like, that's not necessarily true. But it takes work. It takes understanding. You got to write it down in your journal and be like, I don't like the fact that I smoke cigarettes. I don't like the fact that I smell like stale cigarettes. Until it becomes necessary. Like, the easiest way for me to quit smoking back in the day was to start dating somebody who didn't smoke, because I was not going to let them fucking see me smoke. Like, I wasn't going to smell like that. And so the need overpowered the want. And that's not going to work for everybody. It did not work all the time. I would find myself disappearing for a cigarette break more often than not, buying extra cologne, always having to have a toothbrush next to me. Like, that type of behavior management became overwhelming, and to where I'm like, it was brushing my teeth and hiding cigarettes was more like a coke habit, to like dash off to the bathroom every 5 minutes to brush my teeth. And that was a very short-lived relationship, but it was an example of where I recognized my therapy not showing. And we want to, for alternative actions so we have our meal, we have our CFCs, and we have our EDMs, the mindful emotional awareness lessons, our cognitive flexibility captured moments, and then our emotionally driven action management. For alternative actions, it's going to be hard to focus on watching people's therapy show or to understand when they're managing a situation and not focus on the fact that it needed to be done, like with a negative in the conversation. And that's a difficult extension to bring to this type of work. If we want to focus on all the good, there has to be something, an antecedent or a reason why the person is able to shift or change in a moment. And so to bring that honorably, honestly, with a perceived sense of control in the conversation. I don't want to highlight, oh, look at this negative thing that happened to this person, and now they're great. I want to say, look at this work that they did. This is work showing in a moment. So as we understand that we might, and the other part about this level of intense scrutiny of emotion and behavior is that it is crazy work, and it is self-sustaining work that no one else gives a fuck about, because this ain't going to make them money, and this is not going to get you the accolades that you think it will, and especially not tomorrow. Whereas bad behavior can get you accolades tomorrow. And we've learned, like, this is human lesson. Like, this has been going on for thousands of years. But the difference is that the focus of what that's supposed to look like. If you show me what this is supposed to look like, then there's no confusion as to what it's supposed to look like. The confusion is, how do I get there? And it takes that mystery away from why you're not doing the thing that you need to be doing. And it brings the conversation back to how you can get to where you need to go. Not all of us are the same distance away from good behavior, and not all of us are the same closeness to bad behavior. And that can be inversed and reversed at any point in time about any person, because each and every interaction, each and every emotional stimulation is different. It guides differently. It flows differently. It resolves differently. And we learn this and we understand this as humans. That's our body's response to pressure and to resolution and resistance and growth and development. But to know that emotionally, to be intellectually emotional about the conversation and to be able to invite a directional shift into your life, we look for examples in others. And so for this week, as we've established the ideas of what I'm looking for through the process, and you've taken a lot of screenshots, I've taken a lot of notes about the things because the things that I've watched are a little more therapy focused. They're more intentional about what that emotional driven behavior was doing to these individuals, specifically with people who have been through either crisis or trauma situations, or people who were denied the fact that they went through these crisis or trauma situations. So a lot of it is about validity and validation, and then a lot of it is about processing and your work of processing, your ability to process in a moment. It's almost like if you had the right cards in your deck, and then you could just lay down your royal flush, but we had a bunch of royal people sitting there with deuces and jokers in their hand, and we're expected to lay down a royal flush. And now that we have the cards that are correct, we're being judged for the behavior 25 years ago when we were purposefully being given incorrect cards. And while that is a pretty abstract parallel to try to bring to the table, it'll make sense for me later after I listen to this back and go, this is what I should have said. So we'll bring that mindful emotional awareness to our own intention as we bring the conversation back through for our meal, our CFCs, and our EDMs. And I promise to hope to make those make sense. But along the way, we'll bring the alternative actions for those B-sides and rarities, the moments in which we might not have done the thing that we needed to do, but that we can explain it and we can understand. And then we can make poor behavior the rarity. And we can make our mindful emotional awareness the lesson that we can teach others by being the example for ourselves. And I'm John Nathan Jones. We appreciate y'all here as we continue through our conversation of your therapy's showing, and hopefully bring that conversation to a more substantial understanding that what this is this is love. Like, this is love in and of itself for yourself. To bring this information to yourself is the chicken noodle soup for the soul that you need, not maybe from me. Like, I'm giving you the words, I'm giving you my perspective, but to bring that nourishment of emotion to yourself, we start by seeing where others are providing that for us. And for someone who has been through public trauma, I think starting with Miss Paris Hilton as the example of where, like, she's the one who's, I witnessed all of these in the last several hours of footage that I've been watching. Mindful emotional awareness, present, focused. Cognitive flexibility, immediate, able to validate and advocate for self in moments, shifting a perspective so the people in the direct room understand what's necessary, and then emotionally driven action management, taking the therapeutic lessons and then making that into business, like her fragrances and her music and her ability to be world renowned and traveled while still maintaining this work. I understand how much the work is, let alone adding 250 days worth of travel to my life every day. So the alternative actions of that, understanding what perceived control can be, and then what adaptation and adaptability look like for somebody who is able to present this for us as a gift. To me, that's the version of love that she's saying, if you show me real love, baby, I'll show you mine. This is it. And hopefully others can perceive it in that way. And hopefully we'll be able to enrich and enlighten others' lives as we witness this from everybody that's putting their information out there for us to enjoy. All right. We'll see you next time on Your Therapy's Showing.